Hey, this episode is definitely for all of my stormwater nerds out there. We're going to talk a little hydrodynamic separation with a side of trash capture. Hey, everybody, welcome back to a new episode of the Stormwater World podcast. So, we're going to do a little product spotlight today. And, I always think it's funny when I look at some of these products, like the one we're going to look at today, because I think you're going to see more and more of it. And you're not going to realize that this product's been around for over a decade, which is why we're here. We want to talk about these things. We want to get it out there. We want people to know what's going on. But this product is cost effective and simple as it is to help you with your stormwater quality. It's been around for a decade, and I'm willing to bet you probably haven't heard of it. So I'm so happy to introduce you to Lance Hoff, PE and CEO of Momentum Environmental out of St. Paul, Minnesota. And he's here today to talk about the preserver. Lance, welcome to the pod.
Yeah,
Appreciate you being here.
yeah, thanks. Thanks for doing it. It's a great thing you're doing here. So appreciate it.
Thanks,
Mhm.
man. So let's get it. Tell everyone what is the preserver, and how about you start with because I've known about we've known each other for years, and so I've known about the product for years as well. But how about the name? Is that part of the origin story? How did you come up with the name? Like, how do these stormwater quality
Yeah,
devices come to fruition?
yeah. You kind of brainstorm, you spitball a little bit, and I just really, we just really ended up liking it. It fit the bill for what it did. Love the logo. It all just worked out, I guess. So.
I love it.
Yeah.
I do like your logo. I do like your logo. So what does it do? What does it do? How does it work? And how's it going to save me
So
some money?
yeah, the most important thing, right? Um,
Right?
so it's a gravity separator, an HDS unit for stormwater treatment. Um, and probably the best way to get into what it is and what it does is kind of talk about the origin story, like you're saying, like we were discussing before too. So uh, it all started with MnDOT being regulated as an MS4 under NPDES Phase 2. So
Okay.
as part of that, they needed to provide reporting on measurable goals, right? Measurable goal reporting. So for them, they wanted to start with taking all the infrastructure that they had already that was treating stormwater, their ponds, their swales, and then these gravity separators, and get credit for it before they started doing additional work, right? So in particular with the gravity separators, the HGS unit, they had a little bit of a problem in that they had multiple different brands of proprietary units. And then each brand had multiple diameters. So, so they wanted a test protocol or a way to calculate how much material they're getting on an annual basis in pounds of material removed. But it needed to be applied to, they wanted to be able to test each unit, look at one size, and apply the test results to all the units they had in the ground. So, um, to help them with this, they went to the University of Minnesota, and St. Anthony Falls Laboratory is kind of the hydraulics end of things for the University of Minnesota. So they're working with SAFL, and SAFL basically started by researching existing test protocols, and could they take an existing test protocol and apply it to the needs of MnDOT. And after doing some research, they really, I guess number one, they kind of looked at what do we need to really get an accurate estimate of what's being removed in a year. And they said we need to know with these units in particular how good they're removing material during your low flows. But then we also need to know how well they're retaining that material when the high flows, when the rare storms come along, right, and frequent events.
Right.
So they took that kind of thought process and went out looking and found, say 80% removal of OK110 was real popular back then. That's more of an event-based removal. target and testing protocol. There was no testing for what happened during high flow. So that didn't fit the bill. There's also NJDEP, that's been around for a long time. That's similar in that it's testing removal efficiencies at low flows. But then it is creating an annualized removal efficiency. But it's kind of based on the rainfall specific to New Jersey, right? So it's New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And they do testing for higher flows, but not to the extent that would be needed to predict what happens at those large rare storms. Just a little bit of cursory. And then the other thing that didn't do was incorporate the findings into calculation of how that device works on an annual basis. So they kind of tested it, said, hey, it'll work and not scour too bad. So here's a removal efficiency with neglecting how much that scour affects the removal efficiency. That's just not incorporated. So after the researchers at SAPL kind of looked at that, they said, I think we're starting from scratch here to get what we want or what we need for MnDOT. And after that, they started with testing these devices. They tested some in the field using hydrant flow, but they kind of closed it off and made a closed system. So no rainwater, not the traditional kind of just waiting for a storm to happen and monitoring.
Right.
They're running controlled flow through, gathering samples and doing more of a controlled experiment. And they also took devices and brought them into the lab and tested them in the lab using the same protocol. And some of the interesting findings initially from that first round of testing was, what the industry was kind of saying then is, in particular, the swirl separators, swirling water increases removal efficiencies with the idea that it's giving a longer travel path before the water, say a single drop of water, before it can get out, gives it more time to drop out sediment. And the testing reflected that. It actually, the swirl separators performed better than all the other devices tested. So that was kind of a cool thing that, hey, that this is reflecting what we assumed was happening in the market. So from there, went on to test high flows, and that was more eye-opening, really. And because we were testing high, some of these devices tested flows up to say 16 CFS, so or greater in some cases. And whereas the highest test flow, say in an NJDEP that does scour testing, it's less than 4 CFS. So you're talking about multiples of the amount of flow to kind of see what happens during those extreme events. So, and what we saw is, and this is always back when I was consulting and kind of specifying these units, I always had that question in the back of my mind. We're swirling water, which I understand how it can help removals, but I kind of always had in the back of your mind, what does happen during the big storm, right? Because
right,
just
yeah.
mixed
So
it,
yeah, right.
in my mind, I always had envisioned, mixing something up in a glass of water, right? So anytime you're mixing something, you're stirring it around, and that's what you do to mix stuff up, right? So I always kind of had that in the back of my mind, and that's probably the best analogy for what that high flow testing reflected with the swirl separators. So, and kind of as a control, and I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but if you take a sump manhole and the testing for that at a high flow rate, at that 16 CFS, that's where a lot of them, the peak flow that was possible in the lab. So a lot of them were tested up to 16 CFS. If you look at that, the effluent concentration from a sump manhole is about 300 milligrams per liter. And a swirl separator, the ones that were tested were about 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams per liter. So, 8 to 7 to 10 times increasing the scour out of the unit. So that at that point in time, now that was real eye-opening for the engineering community here in Minnesota, because this is happening over quite a bit of time too. I mean, all the testing probably took 7 years in total from start to end. So all this is kind of happening over time, testing all these different units, testing the removal efficiency of the scour. And so we're learning more as we go along. So at that point in time, everybody that was using swirl separators started placing them offline. You'd have a diversion structure going to the treatment structure and a collection structure and a high flow bypass. So what it did is it ended up adding a lot of cost. It worked to prevent that resuspension during high flows, but it just made a more complicated system essentially. So
Got it.
That's kind of where we were at with that. But and how the preserver came along is eventually they went on to test just plain sump manholes. They said, hey, we want credit for sump manholes too, right? So they went and just tested sump manholes. And
so wait, let me recap real quick. Let me wrap my mind around that for a second, Lance, because like for me, I know a lot of people were tracking with you that are going to be listening, but I'm not, I didn't know I was going to need to bring a calculator to this podcast. So let me just back up for a second and wrap my small brain around it. So what had happened, we have this testing going on and this need for, by the entity, I guess, was it DOT, Minnesota? Was it Minnesota DOT? Mm-hmm. And they're like, and so the findings out of this testing, you're like, okay, cool. If I put my spoon in my glass and I stir it up, the stuff drops to the bottom. Perfect. That works. If I blast that same cup with a fire hose, doesn't work as well in the big storms. So, oh no, what do we do? And so the initial reaction was like, okay, well, we got to have a system in place to bypass the initial swirling because we can't handle these big flows. So we got this diverter. So now we've just increased the cost, increased the project, and increased all the things in order to get the same result. And then you step in, and so that's where you're like, okay, so what if we could do all this retroactively in existing sump manholes and the preserver is born? Am I tracking?
Oh, yeah, that's exactly right. Yep.
Oh, so sweet. Yes. I was worried I was worried you completely lost me, sir. But all right, cool. All right. So what years, by the way, what years was all this occurring? When was all this testing happening?
I think the testing started in 2007 was the outset of the testing. Okay. And probably by the time they tested sump manholes and then moved on to looking at energy dissipators to augment sump manholes, that was right around 2012 or so, something like that. And they continued to do some testing too. So, so I kind of had that 7 years wrong, didn't I? A little bit less than that, but maybe from the including research and everything, it was. Sir,
we don't do public math. We don't do public math on this podcast.
Yeah, I need a calculator too, I guess. Yeah.
we don't do public math. But anyways, but so that's interesting. So out of necessity comes, out of necessity comes all this testing, and then out of realization of increase of cost, and like there's nobody wants to do this, comes a new product. Right. Or am I getting ahead of myself? So now how's the birth of the birth of the preserver?
Yeah. I mean, they test some manholes and the long story short, they say actually you can remove some sediment with some manholes. They're not too bad. The problem is the high flows that everything scours out. Right. So that's where they're kind of like, okay, this is MnDOT's the client. How can we take these sump manholes MnDOT has and make them work better? So they're looking for a product that was retrofittable into sump manholes and could prevent that scour from happening. Those are the primary goals. And that's where they kind of looked at energy dissipators and it worked. So it worked to prevent the scour and it also improved removal efficiency. So you could you actually function on an annual basis better than a swirl separator when you account for what happens at high flows. And at a fraction of the cost, you don't have to place them offline. And really the components are less expensive too. Everything's priced on the size of the pipes, not the size of the structures. So probably my best example for that, and getting to your cost question, is we've swapped out a 10-foot proprietary unit, and they had quoted the contractor $55,000. We did the same thing for under 20. So
oh wow, that's a big difference.
Yeah, but the bigger the structure, the more of a difference there's going to be. It's because we're pricing on pipe size, but a small structure will have a cost advantage, and that's just it's bigger the bigger the structure is. Yeah, so like the the testing. So kind of using the sump manhole testing as control again. It had that 300 milligrams per liter effluent concentration. By adding a dissipator, well, we got that down to 15 milligrams per liter at that 16 CFS. So,
So
20-fold
a
reduction.
lot. Yeah, and of course the pod's also on YouTube, but since we don't have the visuals up, let's walk everybody through. So it's a 2-piece product, right? But that work
Mhm.
independently of each other, if I'm correct. And you can let's just walk us through kind of without the visual extras, I guess, of what does it look like? So you've got the dissipator on the inlet side. Am I right? Like,
Yep. Mhm.
I'm going to jack it all up. You explain kind of everybody. It's a
Yep.
2-piece product, and then how it actually works and looks inside of the
Yeah.
sump, if you will.
Yeah. So the preserver is kind of like a system, and like you said, it has 2 components. It has the energy dissipator, which goes on the inlet or inlets if you have multiple inlets.
Okay.
And then you have a skimmer that goes on the outlet. So skimmers are real common in the stormwater treatment industry. You're just trapping any floatable pollutants, and our skimmer operates like any other skimmer on the industry. Functional wise, it's got some benefits in that it's retrofittable and it's adjustable and things like that. But function wise, it's just skimming off floatables, trapping anything that floats, trash, oils, greases, hydrocarbons, things like that. Leaves,
Okay.
or it helps with organics and stuff that kind of float when they come in. And then the dissipator, it's a perforated sheet essentially that we connect, or kind of has a curved shape, connects at the inlet. So it's got a bunch of holes in it, and those orifices are what create the energy losses, and they kind of also work to control the flow regime in the structure and spread that flow out. Makes the sump very quiet. That's how it achieves that sediment retention or low effluence
Gotcha.
concentrations at high
Gotcha.
flows.
Gotcha.
So
All right,
yeah,
that
so
makes sense. And and if you want to see some visuals, folks, you can go to the preserver.com. That's preserver.com, or you can go to Momentum. That's Momentum at env.com, and you can get all your visuals and videos and stuff there. But if you listen to this on a podcast, I just want everybody to understand kind of, what do we, if you can visualize it, if you're in our industry, surely you can visualize what a sump looks like, and then, placing those pieces in the right place. And so not only are we knocking down some TSS, we're also taking care of some floatables. Did I hear that correctly? You're also taking care of some other things, not just the sediment dropout.
Right. Well, so yeah, when you include a skimmer, it addresses the floatables, or it'll capture floatables, and that's part of the preserver design. When we designed it, we tested the dissipator to work with or without a skimmer, and that's because all HDS units on the market, they're all modified sump manholes. They all include skimming. And the exception is here in Minnesota, we're primarily focusing on sediment removal and not the skimming portion. And we're using these structures as pre-treatment to other BMPs that have skimming in them that can capture those materials. So that's a cost saving measure. It would be redundant to include a skimmer. So we're just using the dissipator in Minnesota. Almost everywhere else, we include the skimmer because it's
Okay.
we're usually competing against other HDS units. We don't want that functionality in there, but it's a nice. The product's real flexible. That system, you only pay and you use what you need, right?
Man, it's so simple. I love it just because it's retrofittable, right? I mean, it's like so many things in our world. Like, we got to add this, in our when I say in our world, I mean in our stormwater world, you got to do. It just seems like a lot of heavy lifting, where you can come in and you can literally just put this right in, and I think
Yeah.
that's huge. I mean, for a lot of folks, especially if you didn't know that it existed, that it's out there, it's available, it's tested, it's proven, there's plenty of case study out there.
Yeah.
You didn't just you didn't just pop up and, we've known each other for years. You've been doing this for a decade. You've taken it on the chin a few times. So you've kind of learned, you've had to have learned, right, from all those different 10 years and you're still here. You know what's going on. Let's just touch on it real quick because I always bring it up to everybody when they have a product, and we'll talk about that dirty word in our industry, but I think it's pretty straightforward, which would be maintenance. I'm assuming just vac truck, pop the lid, suck it out when it's, do your inspections and clean it out when it needs to, right?
Yeah,
Nothing special.
That's one of the benefits of the preserver too. Easy to maintain. Like you said, it's just popping the lid. It's just like maintaining a sump manhole. You just work around the components a little bit. They're open on the front and back. They're basically vertical components, so you can get in front and back of all of them with a vac duct. And you kind of hit on a good point there too. Something else I was thinking is, how energy dissipators were adopted in Minnesota, and a lot of the engineering community was following all this testing, like I was talking about through the years. And eventually, what happened is the cities are the ones that really started utilizing them first, and that was because, and I know from watching some other podcasts are talking about how many ponds there are in the world today, right? So what happened is all these cities.
Man. Thanks for the plug, Lance. Appreciate it. Thanks for the plug. Go watch episode 1. Did detention ponds really work, or what? I don't know what we called it. I don't know. We tried to get ourselves canceled on episode 1, but you can go check it out. But go ahead.
That's right. But so in Minnesota, the cities, basically every time a development goes in, they dedicate an easement around the pond, and the cities are responsible for maintaining the pond. They basically own the pond and take over all the maintenance duties. So, so even on private jobs, some ponds are owned privately, but most of them are owned by cities and maintained by cities. So the cities, all these ponds went in 20, 30 years ago, and now they're starting to fill up. So cities are starting to maintain them, and they realize how costly it is. And they're almost always 6 figures, even for a small pond and up, right? So they started realizing that, and they're following this testing, and they're like, hey, they started doing the math. Like, if we can catch half of this sediment before it gets in the pond and just clean it with a vac truck, it's way cheaper for us in the long run, right? We maintain that pond every 60 years instead of every 30 years. And you run the numbers, and so what happened is the cities just started using it. It wasn't a requirement or anything. They wanted that cost benefit of doing it for the long-term maintenance. And eventually what happened is we have watershed districts here. Sometimes I think in other places, like it's counties, the bigger regional areas that have, water quality requirements. Maybe so they started requiring them too. And what they liked about them was, so here our watershed districts are responsible for enforcing maintenance, and to require somebody to go maintain a pond for $100,000 is a bitter pill to swallow. It was something they didn't really like doing, right? But to require them to put in pretreatment and then go clean out a sump for a couple $100, that was just much easier for them. So they really like that aspect of it. And it took all this time, of all these people using it, and the state just finally made a requirement, which was like 8 years into it or so, that maybe even close to a decade, right? That they're finally on board. But what they like about it is even different, because they're responsible for the waters of the state, and they just big picture. If you're pre-treating stormwater, everything downstream of it's working better. So everybody had a different goal, but everybody ended up on the same page. But it was kind of interesting to see it from the grassroots up instead of top down.
Yeah.
So kind of cool part of the story.
That's interesting. Too. It doesn't always happen. It definitely doesn't always happen that way, but it does when you can provide a great cost analysis like that. I mean, it's not even close. I mean, to be able to go in there and say, hey, it's going to cost us all this money to do X that we've been doing forever. Because the challenges, right? The challenges is always like, well, we've always done it that way. Like, oh, man, I hate when I hear that. I hate when somebody says it to me. I'm like, oh. but
That's pretty
that's a
industry-wide and
great.
civil
Yeah, yeah. Well,
construction.
it's just in the
Yeah.
world.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's great to have that kind of big. That's a huge savings. And be able to show that on paper. And see it come to fruition that you're actually been able to save money on your detention pond maintenance due to being able to pre-treat upstream. That's awesome. So 10 years in, and we're trying to get the word out here, right? Like I'm always here for the underdog, the little guy.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Especially on these great products that are obviously cost effective, but what are the challenges that you find yourself up against as far as a smaller manufacturer trying to fight the good fight in stormwater quality? um you want to touch on any of that, or kind of how you want to talk about some of the shots to the chin you've taken over the years and what you're probably going through now, and it's kind of what it's like to be that uh oh man, I can't believe I'm going to say this, a small fish in a big pond. Oh man,
Yes.
sorry, I think I'm funny. Go ahead, Lance. No, seriously, what kind of challenges are you up against in trying to get the word out on your product to get
I
the
mean, I
market
think
share that you probably deserve?
you probably have hit the nail on the head with the biggest one right there is just getting the word out. I mean, um, I think last year it kind of floored me because we have to have a good market presence in Minnesota here, and we're growing out from there, right, from our home base. But I think I had an engineer didn't know what our product was on a project here last year, and it's like, oh, it's been 9 years, it's like it
It
just
was
takes
a engineer in Minnesota.
yeah,
It was in the
in
state.
Minnesota, yeah, yep.
Oh wow.
So I mean, even that close to home, it you don't get full coverage, right? And it just wanes as
Oh, yeah.
you kind of go out geographically. So that's probably been the biggest hurdle, and we found you just really need a champion for the project in any location. So anytime we have somebody that understands the product and is out there pushing it, it's pretty easy to sell. We've got some pretty good information on performance and coming in as alternates as some of the more traditional HTS units. So we have good success if we have somebody out there looking for projects. So it's just kind of getting the word out. That's probably our biggest thing. The other thing, and stormwater in general is a little tricky. You look at like I
Yeah.
mean waste.
Across
You
the
look at the
board,
other
sir.
utilities. Yeah,
Yeah.
you look at the
Yeah.
other utilities. What drinking water and sanitary sewer and all that. Everybody needs that. Everybody needs to do something with that. The stormwater is kind of something people just don't really want to deal with. Haven't it's another
Until their house
utility, but
starts to flood, right?
yep,
Until their house
right,
starts to flood,
yep,
or they can't go to the beach, then they're like, "What's going on?"
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yep.
So and it's always gonna kind of be like that to some extent because water quality is more important in some areas than other areas. And you look at sediment filling up Chesapeake Bay or reservoirs, and you want to protect salmon in the Pacific Northwest. In Minnesota, we want to control algae and are looking at phosphorus, and then
Oh,
LA, it's
okay.
trash, right? So
Trash. Yep.
every
Yep.
region has their own problems, and they have specific requirements for that. So that's kind of the first part of that problem, and that's not just our problem, that's everyone's problem. So you're always kind of dealing with something different in different areas. And then but more problematic to that is we've seen like a lot of industries, we've had a lot of consolidation recently. So you have basically just three big water quality manufacturers right now that are kind of driving market forces. You got like ADS bought Bay Saver, and Contec just bought Forterra, who owns BioClean, and Old Castle bought Hydro International. So you got these three big
Crazy,
companies.
man. It's
Oh yeah,
crazy. I feel
yeah,
like I've
big.
been watching that. I've been watching that consolidation for the 10, 12 years I've been in the industry. It's crazy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
wild.
So there's not a whole lot of us little people left, really. I mean, there's a
Do you feel
handful.
like? Do you feel like? in that thought, do you feel like when that happens? I mean, I don't know if it's a good thing or bad thing, or just is a thing, and it's just the way of the world that we live in. But do you feel like when that happens, it tends to stifle innovation? Do you feel like these big companies are innovating, or do you feel like they've got some things, they're gonna sell what they've got, and it hurts
Yeah,
the person that comes up with an idea? I mean, obviously, you didn't come up with this idea yesterday. We've said it
right.
multiple times already. Decade. We're a decade in, and here you are fighting against these monsters. Um, how do you feel about that? Like, do you have an opinion on,
Yeah,
like,
I think
just in
that's
general?
that's kind of a tough one. I guess if I think about it, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. And the big companies, the big companies to me, they're machines. We've worked with a couple of them, and there's so many layers of management and in some of those big companies that they're really just a machine. They don't have ill intent or you know necessarily bad intent, and they're just profit driven, really. So they're
Right.
gonna protect their own interests. If they're making money doing it a certain way, they want it to stay that way. So in that regard, that would stifle innovation that came from outside their company. But if they have something in it, they're all developing products too. So if they are developing something that's innovative, it's also going to be promoted pretty quickly and get out to the
That's
market
true.
pretty quickly. So I guess it's a little bit of a double-edged sword. So if they do it themselves, they're pro innovation. If it comes from outside, they're usually gonna try to stifle it, right? So
Yeah.
so the I guess the antidote for the where they're trying to stifle outside competition is where we've had our success, especially starting out as a new company. We really had to have the early adopters of a new technology. So really appreciative of the people that, said, hey, we're gonna take that product, we're gonna give you a shot. And we worked real closely with them, made sure the stuff was working well. And that, we couldn't have gotten up and running without those early adopters. So anybody watching this that, wants to promote innovation, that's probably the best way to do it, right? Is keep an eye out for new technologies, especially some of these smaller companies, and help support them and promote those products. So preserver's probably not there anymore. We've been around for a long time, like you pointed out. We're over that hump, but I
That's
would
good
say,
then.
yeah,
But
I mean,
but like you said, you feel like you're over that hump, but you got an engineer in your own state that just is clueless, of
yeah,
knowing that you're out there. So like,
yeah,
see, Lance is a nice guy. Everyone, he's a nice guy. He's an engineer by trade. I'm surrounded by engineers in my life, and so I'll be the loudmouth and just say, "Hey, go check out the preserver. Go to the
hmm,
website, check it out, bookmark it. At least know that it exists." So that you could look for an opportunity to save some money, right? And to
yeah,
check and to try it out, right? Let's go. He's
yeah,
got the data. In 10 years, you've got the data. These things are in the ground, doing what they're supposed to do, in the pre-treatment aspect of water quality. So let's make it happen. But
yeah,
did you want to talk about any testing? I know we had talked about. Well, we kind of talked a lot about testing, earlier, but I guess I don't know if we kind of drew a good line for everybody about just that there's just so many testing, and that not all tests are created equal, and that not, there's not a one size fits all. Do you just want to
yeah.
give a kind of come back to that, just kind of put a bow on
Well,
that for everybody so they understand, your take on the testing environment in our
and
industry?
maybe this is probably a good way to give an example of stifling innovation too. So, um, talk about those big three manufacturers, right? So every single one of them has an HDS unit that's been tested at the University of Minnesota by the University of Minnesota using the same test protocol that led to the development of the preserver. But their results for their swirl separators, aren't favorable. So they're obviously not going to promote that. They're all aware of it, but they're not going to promote it, right? So
Right.
they're going to promote the test protocol that reflects favorably on their unit, and that's understandable. Like I said, they're going to protect what they have and where they make their profits. But um, you know, for the industry, I think it's a negative, right? Because we found a better way to do it. We found a better we discovered that, you have to test higher flow rates to really know how these devices are working. That's one thing about if you look at the hierarchy of treatment, these HDS
Sure.
units are probably, if you're going to do a treatment train, they'd be the first thing. They probably provide the lowest level of treatment overall. Then you kind of go to filters and infiltration, and then you go to chemical augmentation, and you kind of work your way up the ladder. But because they're kind of at the bottom, because they treat such high flows, I think is the reason that you kind of see all this controversy, because all those other devices treating very low flows, the testing is very straightforward. But with the
Ah,
testing of the HDS units, historically, just the way the protocols were developed, they really just tested the low flow rates, and it's just kind of propagated forward. And because people aren't aware of the University of Minnesota testing, they don't understand the importance of how those high flows affect overall effectiveness of these devices.
cool.
So,
That's what I wanted everybody to hear. I mean, we kind of, I felt like we danced around it maybe a little bit in the beginning, but that's the big key difference, right? Or maybe I just wasn't. I mean, hopefully I was listening. I'd like to think I was listening. It's just you and I. But is that high flow test rate? That's the difference.
oh,
That's the. I mean, because it's
100%.
just.
Mhm.
I mean, that's part of the game. The first 10 minutes, or the big flush, or whatever you want to call it, or just the big storm event. I guess maybe even the first so many minutes of a rain event are kind of irrelevant, because any rain event's a rain event. But some of these big storms, and we keep seeing them more and more. I mean, I live in Southeast Texas, so it's either pouring or it's drought, right? So we just get these
Yeah, right.
huge, intense storms
Mhm.
outside of the hurricane season, where we get these crazy storms. So
Mhm.
I don't know. That's just something to think about. And I think it's a key point to what the preserver is able to bring to the table, especially as or whatever, as an alternative solution, as a different solution, as a outside the box. As don't check the box, don't do it the way you've always done it.
Right. Yeah,
Take a
yeah, and
look at this
that's what
idea.
that's kind of what we're up against, is some of these old test protocols. There, check the box. It's the easy button for the engineer and the owner. And but kind of our point to everybody is, we're also the easy button. So we could be used side by side. We think the testing's more accurate. We can verify it with our field monitoring, and we just think it's a better option. So it's much more holistic. It's the most accurate testing methodology and protocol on the market, really. So just need to
Nice.
get the
See,
word out
right
there,
there.
like
There
you
it is.
said.
He's saying, he's dropping bombs, y'all. He says it real nice and soft and
Mhm.
steady, but he just told you what he's got going on. But hey, look, everyone, I'm not trying to sell you the preserver. I'm just trying to get you to just, I don't know. I just don't like that phrase, man. I just don't like we've always done it that way, or whatever. There's so many great products out there that can save you time, money, and actually make a difference in the water quality, that you just got to be willing. Um, and that's what we're trying to do here. Quite honestly,
Mhm.
again, not trying to sell you a preserver, just trying to bring the value out there, trying to bring the word out there, so that at least it exists, so
Oh,
that you can try to take advantage of some of this technology that's out there. Lance, where do you see, so 10 years? What's the next 10 years going to look like in our industry? Is there going to be one company? No, is there, no. Is there going to be one big company? No. What do you think that what's the future look like for Momentum Environmental and for the stormwater treatment industry as a whole?
no.
Put on your future
Yeah,
hat.
well,
Tell me what you think.
I guess momentum, I probably have a better finger on the pulse with, but when we started the company and we went down the product development path, we always envisioned having more than one product. And it kind of goes back to the other podcast too. It's like, wow, it took so long to get even to where we're at now, and I feel like we just scratched the surface. That we're just finally starting to get into development of our second product. So hopefully we have a
Uh
line, of products. That'd be great. Um, and to, you know, as far as the industry as a whole, you know, and like I said, hopefully what the big takeaway from the podcast is, there is going to be a whole hopefully a whole lot new technology that comes out. And ideally people are, fostering innovation, because there's got to be better ways to target even the new pollutants that we're seeing. We've got a little bit of a moving target. It's like, oh yeah, it's just sediment to start with, then it's nutrients, then it's heavy metals, and we're on to, the next pollutant, right? And who knows what's after that. So we're really going to have to,
Yeah.
Keep an open mind and give some new technologies a chance. There's got to be a way to get them in the ground and monitor them and help out that innovation, right? And for the future of the industry, that's part of it. And just like everything else, I just see technology being a bigger part of our industry. So I think P4 is probably ahead of the curve on that one. But
Oh yeah, hey, shout out to P4 Infrastructures. Yeah, they got a lot of good tracking devices.
They do, they do, and I see just a lot more of that in the market. Stormwater, that's the third utility. The cities, they can sit and look at their SCADA systems and know exactly what's going on with their water supply and sanitary sewers, and the same's probably going to be happening with storm sewer eventually. Probably more so in some areas like Pacific Northwest than others. I see it happening there first, or more and more, I should say. So that technology, that's gonna be a part of our industry for sure. That's my guess. That's what I see.
That's your, no, that's your crystal ball. That's what you think is your crystal ball. I see. I don't know. I don't know if you guys are paying attention, and gals and folks out there. You just got to pay attention to what Lance is saying. He's dropping some little nuggets on us, and what I feel like I heard him say that is he's hinting at another product coming out in the Momentum Environmental family. So we're hoping here in Stormwater World that we're going to get a chance to unveil that. If I'm reading the tea leaves right, I think that's what I heard him say. So Lance, I hope you'll come back, and when you're ready to launch that product, you'll come back on the pod and tell us all about it. So.
Oh yeah, I'd love to. That'd be great. Appreciate it.
See, I knew that's what I heard. Yeah, so see, that's kind of confirmation. So something's going on. Something's happening. So something's happening out there in the background. I thought, you were kind of dancing around there again. So I don't want to. I'm just going to recap and just go straight after it. Be like, we got something else coming down the pipe that he doesn't want to name, but that is definitely happening. Sir, it's always a pleasure. It's good to see you, even if it's in this virtual format. It's good to talk to you on the pod. I appreciate you sharing your information. What's the easiest way for folks to get in touch with you if they've got questions about, Momentum Environmental or about the preserver? How should they touch base?
LinkedIn, it's Lance Hoff, LinkedIn, A2FF. And we have two websites. One's for the company, momentumenv.com. That's ENV short for environmental. And then we got one for our product, which is thepreserver.com.
Gotcha. We'll put all that in the show notes too. We'll link all that for you in the show notes. Any parting thoughts, any final thoughts, anything we missed that you would like to share with the listeners on stormwater, life, preserver, water quality, anything rattling around that I didn't get?
No, you did a good job.
What's that?
I feel like I've gotten everything off my chest. How about you? You got anything you want
to? That's all. That made my day right there. That's all I wanted to hear. So you feel cleansed and that you got everything off your chest. Folks, that's it. We appreciate you. Lance, I appreciate you coming on the pod. Thank you so much, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having it. We appreciate it. For sure. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Stormwater World podcast. Do you have something you'd like to discuss? Do you have an opposing opinion regarding something you heard during this episode? Let's talk about it. Click on the link in the show notes to sign up for a future episode. I'd love to visit with you about what's happening and how you see things unfolding in your stormwater world.